The air left my lungs when my ex-husband looked the judge dead in the eye and said, "She is unstable. She lies to our daughter. I want full custody." He said it so calmly, like he was reading a weather report. And the judge nodded slightly, as if it all made perfect sense. I wanted to scream, to sob, to explain. But my body had turned to stone. I just sat there on that unforgiving wooden bench, feeling my heart hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. This man, who once whispered he loved me, was now telling the court I was a threat to my own child, to Mila, the only person on this earth I loved more than my next breath. Mila was sitting right behind him, clinging to my mother's hand. She's only 7, but nothing gets past her. Her big, brown eyes were locked on mine, wide and knowing. She felt the ground crumbling beneath us, too. I was going under, and there was no lifeline. My ex-husband, Damon, sat beside his lawyer in a sharp, dark blue suit. He looked like he was about to close a major deal, not fight for our daughter. Composed. Persuasive. Every word out of his mouth was smooth and reasonable. It made me sick. This was the same man who'd scream at me in a fast food drive-thru for getting his order wrong. Now, he was presenting himself as the picture of perfect, responsible fatherhood. He had a gift for making people see exactly what he wanted them to see. That was his real talent. The judge turned her gaze to me. "Ms. Lennox, do you wish to respond?" I opened my mouth. A hollow, shaky sigh was all that came out. My lawyer gave me a tense, sidelong glance. The silence in the courtroom became a physical weight, pressing down. My hands trembled in my lap. This was it. I was going to lose my daughter in this sterile room, and no one could see the terrible truth right in front of them. Then, a small voice cut through the silence from the rows behind me. "Your Honor." It was quiet, but crystal clear. "I have a video from my dad's phone. I think you need to see it." The entire room seized up. Every head turned. The judge's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Damon's face drained of all color. Mila stood up. In her small hands was her pink tablet. Her face was dry, her chin set. She looked impossibly brave. She walked right past her mother, past the woman who wanted to erase me, and straight up to the judge's bench to hand over the device. I didn't know that video existed. I didn't know she even knew how to get it. But in that moment, I felt the entire axis of the room tilt. The judge took the tablet. "What is this, young lady?" Mila's voice didn't waver. "It's from last weekend. My dad said those things when he thought I was sleeping. But I was awake. I heard all of it. He was really mad. I thought, if you didn't believe my mom, maybe you'd believe him." My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. My little girl had just done what I was powerless to do. She stood up and spoke the truth. And just like that, the courtroom, that place where I had felt so small and invisible, suddenly belonged to her. Before the courtroom, the legal filings, and the suffocating silence under the judge's gaze, our world was just me and Mila. We lived in a small apartment with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and floorboards that sang with every step, especially at night. Mila loved the sound. She called our place our cozy nest. She said the pink curtains in her room looked like a spun sugar cloud. Every night, she'd curl up with her stuffed penguin, Pepper, and bargain for 2 stories instead of 1. I never said no. I worked from home as a freelance designer. The pay wasn't great, but it kept us afloat. My mom, Caroline, lived just a few blocks over. She was my backup on days when deadlines closed in. She didn't always have the perfect words, but she had perfect timing. She'd appear at the door with a pan of lasagna, or I'd find her quietly scrubbing the bathtub. "You're doing better than you think, Aria," she'd say. And for a while, I could almost believe her. Mila was 7, sharp, kind, and saw straight through people. It unnerved some adults. Her questions had a way of peeling back layers. One night, she found me crying by the kitchen sink. She didn't speak. She just fetched the softest blanket from the couch and wrapped it around my shoulders. That was her heart, plain and simple. Our best creation was the truth jar. I started it after Damon and I split. I told Mila that if anything ever felt confusing, scary, or too big to say out loud, she could write it down and put it in the jar. Each evening, we'd pull one slip of paper and read it together. Some notes were light. Why do feet smell? Others were anchors in my chest. If I live with you mostly, will Dad forget about me? I promised myself I'd always give her an honest answer, no matter how much it ached. The divorce was brutal. Damon wasn't looking for a co-parent. He was looking for total control. Legally, we shared custody, but in reality, he dictated every term. He critiqued everything: the snacks I packed, a 5-minute delay at pickup, the brand of her socks. When Mila came home from his weekends, she'd be withdrawn, a quiet shadow of herself until Tuesday rolled around. I tried to explain this pattern in court, but Damon was a master performer. The ex-athlete turned successful manager. All charming smiles, firm handshakes, and remembered birthdays. In public, he was everyone's favorite guy. In private, a misplaced phone charger could unleash a storm. I kept records of everything: text threads, emails. I had a dedicated folder filled with proof, him calling me unhinged, messages laced with venom no child should ever overhear. But I never showed that folder to Mila. I believed, fiercely, that hiding his darkness was how I kept her safe. The question came one Sunday evening, after a weekend at Damon's that had left Mila too quiet. "Mom," she asked, her voice small, "were you ever scared of Dad?" My breath caught. Before I could form a lie, she looked down at her hands in her lap and whispered, "I was." But I'm not supposed to say that, am I? I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the cracks in the ceiling, a terrible question echoing in the dark. Had my peacekeeping been a form of surrender? Should I have fought harder, louder, sooner? Weeks later, the official papers arrived. Damon was petitioning for full custody. The words accused me of being unstable, a negative influence, incapable of providing a stable home. His lawyer's letter spelled it out: unstable, unreliable, unfit. Reading it, my hands trembled so badly the pages fluttered to the floor. I sank down right there on the kitchen tiles. My mom found me, sat beside me, and folded my cold hands into hers. "You know the truth, Arya. That has to be enough." I desperately wanted to believe her. But a courtroom isn't a temple of truth, it's a theater of evidence and strategy. Damon's lawyer was already crafting a character for me, the erratic, emotional ex. My own attorney had coached me: don't cry. Don't speak out of turn. Don't react. So I sat, screaming on the inside while forcing stillness on the outside. Mila saw it all: the clenched jaw, the unshed tears. I'd squeeze her hand and whisper, "It'll be okay," a mantra I'd stopped believing in. I didn't realize how closely she was watching. I didn't understand how much she was absorbing. And it never crossed my mind that she, at 7 years old, was formulating a plan. She had grasped a fundamental fact the adults had lost sight of: the truth needed a witness, and the court needed to see it for itself. The custody hearing was set for a Monday morning. The night before, I kept vigil by Mila's bed. She slept, her arms wrapped tightly around Pepper the penguin, while I watched the clock tick toward dawn. A heavy, invisible weight pressed on my chest. This wasn't just a legal date, it was a battle for the very essence of her childhood, for the life I had poured my soul into building. In the morning, my mom arrived, wearing her silk church scarf, her armor for when the world demanded more strength than she felt. She knew mine was spent. Mila put on her blue sunflower dress and carefully placed her school tablet in her backpack. The car ride was a silent movie. She stared out the window, humming a faint, unfamiliar tune. At the courthouse, Damon was already holding court in the hallway. He wore the same dark blue suit from our wedding rehearsal dinner, but the man inside it was a stranger. His smile was a calculated gesture, devoid of warmth. His lawyer, polished and prepped, spoke in low, rehearsed tones beside him. Damon turned, caught my eye, and offered a friendly, mocking wave as if we were old acquaintances meeting by chance. Mila, holding my hand, looked straight ahead and did not wave back. The courtroom felt like a stark, polished stage where everything was shiny and cold. Our case was called, but the person on trial wasn't really me. It was the fictional, unstable character Damon had meticulously constructed on paper. Judge Harmon entered, and a hush fell. She was tall, with an air of no-nonsense efficiency. She didn't linger. Her eyes went straight to Damon's lawyer. Proceed. And so, the performance began. His lawyer painted a portrait of Damon as the pillar of reliability, a stable job, an orderly home, a father solely motivated by protecting his daughter from my alleged chaos. He presented our text messages, expertly gutted of context. A text where I confessed, "I'm just so tired today," was framed as evidence of mental collapse. A plea of, "Please don't yell in front of Mila," was twisted into emotional manipulation. I sat there, numb, listening to the man I once shared a life with weaponize my every vulnerability. Then Damon took the stand. His voice was a model of calm concern. "She's not well. She tells our daughter terrible things about me. It's confusing for Mila. I'm not here out of anger. I just want to protect my little girl." The word protect landed like a physical blow. Judge Harmon's gaze shifted to me. "Ms. Lennox, would you like to respond?" I opened my mouth. A dry, silent gasp. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My tongue felt like a dead weight. All I could do was turn and look at Mila. She was on the bench behind me, her small legs swinging gently. She looked back at me, and her expression, a deep, sober worry, yet completely absent of fear, is etched in my memory forever. My lawyer stepped in, clearing his throat. He offered something generic about resilience and the universal stresses of single parenting. It was weak tea. He didn't mention the phone calls where Damon's screams echoed through the speaker. He didn't bring up the pattern of Mila's Tuesday silences. The judge just nodded and scribbled on her pad. Damon stood once more, smoothing his suit jacket. "Your Honor, for the child's well-being, I'm formally requesting full custody. The current arrangement is causing harm. Joint custody is no longer viable." The walls of the room seemed to lean in, squeezing the air from my lungs. I gripped the wooden armrests, my knuckles white. I looked at Mila, my mind screaming, "How do I protect you from this?" And then she moved. She let go of my mother's hand, slid off the bench, and walked directly toward the front of the courtroom. She didn't glance for permission. She didn't hesitate. Her voice, clear as a bell, cut through the thick silence. "Your Honor." The entire room froze. Damon's face clouded over, turning stormy. My mother drew a sharp breath. I turned, my own disbelief holding me captive. Mila stood perfectly straight, her school tablet held in both hands. "I brought a video from my dad's phone. I think you should watch it." The judge leaned forward slightly. "I'm sorry, young lady, what did you say?" Mila lifted the tablet. "It's from last weekend." He didn't know I was awake, but I heard everything. I thought it was important. Not a soul made a sound. Damon was statue still. His lawyer seemed to have forgotten his script. In that absolute quiet, I felt the very foundation of the hearing shift. Mila hadn't just produced a device. She had brought the raw, unedited truth into the room, and its presence was suddenly palpable to everyone. She stood in the center of the courtroom, her sunflower dress slightly too short at the wrists. But she didn't shuffle her feet or search the room for reassurance. She simply stood there, a small, steady figure before the judge. "I brought a video from my dad's phone," she repeated, her voice unwavering. "I think you should see it." The judge gave a brief nod to the bailiff. "Bring it here." Mila walked forward and placed the tablet into the bailiff's hands. He carried it to the bench. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum where you could hear the hum of the lights. Damon's jaw was locked, his lips pressed into a bloodless seam. His lawyer's eyes darted nervously between his client and the device. No one moved. Judge Harmon turned the screen and pressed play. At first, there was only the muffled, hollow sound of a quiet house at night. Then, a voice loud, venomous, utterly unlike the controlled tone he used in court. It was Damon, raw and unleashed. "You think you're so clever? Go ahead, tell someone. See what happens. You'll wind up in a foster home, and your pathetic mommy won't be able to do a thing about it." A chair leg screeched against the floor. Dishes rattled. Then, Mila's tiny, trembling voice, "I'm sorry. Don't you talk back to me," he roared. "You're lucky I let you stay here at all. If you breathe a word of this, I swear." The judge hit pause. She said nothing, her eyes fixed on the frozen screen. Damon shifted uncomfortably. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but the judge lifted a hand, a simple, silencing gesture that brooked no argument. She looked at Mila, her tone measured. "Where did you get this?" Mila answered without hesitation. "He left his phone on the couch. I woke up and heard everything. I knew I had to record it. I was scared, but I thought if another grown-up heard it, they might believe me and my mom." My heart seized. My little girl had been terrified, yet she had executed a plan with a foresight and courage that dwarfed my own. Every instinct screamed to rush over, wrap her in my arms, and tell her she never should have carried that burden. But I remained in my seat. This was her testimony. This was her stand. Damon's voice sliced through the room, sharp with fury. "Your Honor, this is a gross misrepresentation. That was a private moment of discipline. She was having a tantrum, that's all. Enough." The judge's single word was quiet, yet it fell like a guillotine. Damon's mouth snapped shut. Judge Harmon's expression softened just a fraction as she looked at Mila. "Thank you for your courage," she said, her voice firm yet kinder. "You may return to your seat." Mila nodded, walking back slowly, as if the gravity of what she had just done was finally settling on her small frame. My mother gathered her onto her lap, arms wrapping around her in a tight, protective cocoon. The judge then turned her gaze to me. "Ms. Lennox, is there anything you wish to add?" And now the words came, clear and sure. "No, Your Honor. I believe my daughter has said everything that needs to be said." The judge gave a slow, deliberate nod. She leaned back in her tall chair, closed her eyes for one brief second as if resetting the scales in her mind, then opened them and addressed the room. "In light of this evidence," she stated, her voice leaving no room for debate, "I am ordering an immediate and full review of the custody arrangement. Pending that review, temporary full physical and legal custody is granted to Ms. Lennox. Mr. Blake will be permitted visitation with the child under strictly supervised conditions only. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Blake from the courtroom." Damon sat frozen. "You can't be serious," he blurted, the polished facade cracking. The bailiff moved forward. For a moment, it looked like Damon would protest, but he seemed to think better of it. He simply stood, shot a look of pure venom in our direction, and strode out, his lawyer scrambling to collect papers and follow. As the courtroom slowly began to empty, we didn't move. We sat in our little island of wooden benches. Mila was utterly still, her head a heavy weight on my mother's shoulder. Finally, I rose, my legs unsteady, and knelt beside them. "You are so incredibly brave," I whispered. Mila nodded into my mom's neck, but said nothing. I could see the magnitude of it all finally landing on her, the sheer size of what she had just done. This wasn't just about telling a secret. It was about dismantling a lifetime of lessons in silence. She had rewritten the rules, and in doing so, changed our entire future. The moment the door closed behind Damon and the bailiff, the atmosphere shifted. It was as if someone had finally thrown open a sealed window. The stifling pressure lifted. I drew in a deep, shuddering breath. It wasn't a breath of peace, not yet, but it was the first full breath I'd taken in that room, a reminder that I still had a voice, and now it might actually be heard. Judge Harmon left for her chambers without another word. Her professional mask hadn't slipped, but as she passed, her glance toward Mila held something new, a stark, clear respect. I began to gather our belongings with clumsy hands. Mila, curled like a comma on my mother's lap, watched me, exhausted but awake. Her pink tablet lay dark and inert on the bench beside her. Its terrible job was done. I took her small hand. "Ready to go home?" She nodded and slipped down from the bench. Walking out, we felt the stares. Some people averted their eyes quickly, uncomfortable. Others met our gaze. A woman in a dark suit, passing by, caught Mila's eye and silently mouthed two words, "Brave girl." Just outside the courtroom doors, in the echoing hallway, I knelt down. My hands found her shoulders. "Are you okay?" She gave a small shrug, then whispered the truth. "I didn't want to do it, but I had to." "I know, baby. I know. I am so proud of you. You should never have had to carry that by yourself." She looked at the shiny floor. I didn't know if they'd believe me. My throat closed with emotion. They believed you. Because you told the truth. Because you were strong enough for both of us when I couldn't be. Mila looked up then, and her eyes were shining with unshed tears. So, I don't have to go back to Dad's house. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as tightly as I dared. You're safe, I breathed into her hair. That's what matters now. You're safe. A court officer explained the new, temporary orders to us in the hallway. Damon would be limited to supervised visits at a designated center, and only after a court-ordered psychological evaluation. It was made clear this wasn't over. There would be more filings, more hearings, more navigating the legal labyrinth. But the core of the battle, the part where we could have lost everything in one afternoon, was behind us. We went straight to my mom's house. I couldn't face our quiet apartment, where every creak of the floor felt like an echo of anxiety. Mom, as she does, responded to crisis with chicken soup, simmering on the stove despite the mild weather. It grounds you, she'd say. Gives you something solid when you feel scattered. Mila sat at the kitchen table, filling a page with pencil drawings. I worked through a new stack of paperwork on the couch. After a while, she brought me a sheet of paper. The drawing was simple, 2 large hands cradling a careful, detailed heart. Below it, in her earnest, 7-year-old handwriting, she had spelled out, "Truth is brave." My heart didn't just clench, it recognized that truth. It was the kind that aches its way to the surface, the voice you find when you're done being quiet. Mila didn't explain her artwork. She just climbed up, settled beside me, and rested her head against my arm. That night, we brought the truth jar out from its corner. It had a fine layer of dust, a sign of the strained, silent weeks we'd endured. I cradled the jar in my lap, and Mila sat facing me on her bed. Want to do the honors? I asked. She shook her head softly and pointed to the folded note on top. I carefully opened it and read the words aloud. What do you do when the truth hurts? I met her gaze. Is this yours, sweetheart? She nodded. I didn't want to make Dad sad. I just didn't want to be afraid all the time anymore. I took her small hand in both of mine. Sometimes the truth does hurt, but choosing silence. That pain lasts longer and spreads wider. You didn't hurt anyone, Mila. You protected us. You kept us safe. She looked at the jar, then back at me, her voice a whisper. We should still do this. We will, I promised, my own voice thick. Every single night. After she fell asleep, I slipped into the living room and stood at the window. The ordinary world was out there, streetlights painting pools of orange on the pavement, the occasional car rolling by. But inside, our world had fundamentally shifted. Damon was no longer the author of our story. And most powerfully, he was no longer the censor of Mila's voice. For the first time since the divorce papers were served, I took a breath that didn't catch on a hook of dread. I wasn't a lone soldier in this trench anymore. My little girl had been forced onto the battlefield far too early, and she hadn't just endured, she had turned the tide. The final custody hearing was held 4 weeks to the day after Mila raised her voice in the courtroom. In that month, a quiet revolution had occurred. The court-appointed psychologist had interviewed Damon and submitted a report. It detailed his course of control, his emotional volatility, and his profound lack of understanding regarding Mila's needs. He contested every point, but his denials were useless against the evidence. The video was incontrovertible. Combined with Mila's testimony, it formed an unimpeachable truth. Judge Harmon's ruling was definitive. Full legal and physical custody was granted to me. Damon was allocated 2 supervised visits per month at a family center. No more overnights. No more unsupervised moments. No more opportunities for whispered threats or hidden cruelty. Mila's small, clear voice had permanently dismantled that old reality. We walked out of the courthouse that day in a shared, exhausted silence. Mila's hand was a firm anchor in mine as we descended the broad, stone steps. My mother walked close beside us, her eyes performing a protective sweep of the plaza, but we all knew Damon was gone. He had not spoken a single word to me since the day the video played, and his absence was a relief. That evening, we went to Mila's favorite diner, with its worn red vinyl booths and pancakes shaped like elephants, and bears. She sat across from me, swirling her chocolate milk with a straw, and finally asked the question she'd been holding. "Is it over now?" "This big fight is," I said. "It's safer now. We still have a journey ahead, but we don't have to walk it in fear anymore." She nodded, a solemn little gesture. "I'm glad I told." "Me too, sweetheart." "Me too." I still replay that moment in the courtroom sometimes. The way Damon's mask of confidence splintered when Mila began to speak. Her voice, steady and sure, carried more power than any legal argument ever could. "My daughter taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Strength isn't defined by volume. It's found in the quiet courage to speak a truth, even when you have no guarantee anyone will listen." A few weeks after the order was finalized, I returned to therapy. Not because I was breaking, but because I was finally stable enough to unpack everything I'd been carrying. I realized I'd been operating in pure survival mode for years, to the point where I'd forgotten the basic sensation of safety. Healing will take time. But for the first time, I have the time to give it. Mila's drawings began to evolve. The windowless houses and dark, swirling skies of her earlier sketches were gone. In their place were pictures of strong trees with roots digging deep into the earth, and of children linking hands. She even made a detailed drawing of our truth jar and taped it to her bedroom wall. It's a nightly reminder of our promise. One evening, I pulled a note from the jar and read it aloud. "Do brave people get scared?" I couldn't help but smile. "Yes," I answered. "All the time. But brave people don't let fear write the ending to their story." A few days later, a new note appeared. "Can kids protect grown-ups?" I looked at her, my amazing, fierce girl, and felt my eyes well up. "You already did," I said. "I am sharing this story because I know, somewhere at this very moment, another woman is sitting in the silent dark, asking herself, is my truth powerful enough? Will anyone see past the charming performance to believe the real me?" I am sharing this because the whole, unvarnished truth doesn't always come from a lawyer's opening statement or a carefully filed affidavit. Sometimes it comes from the smallest person in the room, a child who has witnessed too much and has finally found that silence is no longer an option. I used to believe that being a good mother was about building a perfect, painless world for Mila. Now I know it's about standing beside her in the imperfect, painful one. It's about teaching her that her voice has power, showing her that tears are not a sign of weakness, but a testament to feeling deeply, and proving that after the tears, you can rise and move forward, together. We still have difficult days. Grief and anxiety don't vanish with a court order. But those days no longer define us. We are not the frightened, diminished people Damon tried so hard to shape. We choose when to speak and when to embrace our quiet. Above all else, we are free. That day in court, Mila didn't just save our family, she saved us both. She brought with her not only a damning piece of evidence, but a brilliant, clarifying light. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the panicked dread of losing her. Instead, in her astounding courage, I saw her, truly and completely, for the remarkable person she is. If you have stayed with me this far, thank you. Unfolding this story has been one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I do it believing that stories like this are lifelines. Because somewhere, another mother is holding her breath, wondering if she will be heard. Perhaps she just needed to know she is not alone. If this story resonated with you, if it found a place in your heart, please like this video. Share it with someone who might need its message. Leave a comment. I read every single one, and they are a source of strength. If you want to follow along for more honest, real stories of resilience, please subscribe and turn on notifications. This isn't an ending, it's a new beginning. Thank you for walking this path with me. Stay brave, stay kind, and always, always remember, the truth matters. With a heart emoji, Arya.